Lama dangon poche tsunjampeya na chatselo gangi loje jibni jinta nitar namda rabza jinye dungu nijin zichi niki tukar lekbam zin kangda zipe tsunjer mari muntom dunga jiziwe rozo kunla buchi tarze yenla juju yanzen Trudar chendro nyamo nilo leki chadro drodze ching mari munse dunga nyuku jinye chuse raji nam Döne dangshin sachi tarzun yönten luzu yawe tuku 주다 주다 주니 년제 다르면서 잠베 양라주 오마라 바사나 오마라 바사나 오마라 바사나 오마라 바사나디 세덴 제기 젠랍 으세디 달르티 무문 바랍살네 가단 텐주 윤루 도바이 로드 보페 나와 zel두 소 간제 타워드 밤 준세 리와르드 나양 곤포 잠잠 제니니 갱메 빠르양 통화쇼. Welcome to our class. So I imagine now, maybe you guys remember we used to, when we first started the class and we recited that Manjushri prayer, it must have looked like uh, a mystery. But now I think we can recognize some of the structures, and it might even make sense, some sense, I guess. For example, this Tongwar Shok, may we see this knee we know is marking something young, not young, like even or whatever. Palm, so it's like working as an and, or in this case, or uh, do we see all these agente particles? Topai, this is connected particle. This is a source particle, agente particle of this. So I just let me check. So I just want to point out how we should rejoice in our progress. We've made good progress. I saw Kip's message that he made some tukpa for us to celebrate the completion of our 3 months. Unfortunately, because I had some things I had to do, I was expecting to finish the class by now, but um, we will finish somehow this book. I think we only need maybe between 2 or 4 more classes, I guess. So later I will set up a couple more meetings. I'll gauge more or less how long we need, and then I'll send you guys on WhatsApp the message, seeing how many more classes we will be doing, and then I will finish this book. And of course, not everything is in this book, but this is the foundation. There are some more structures which maybe in the future we can cover, or maybe also it's good to take a break sometimes and apply what you've learned on your prayers and read some text. Like I recommend doing Kunsan Lame Gelung, the words of my perfect teacher. Just go through it with both the Tibetan text, which Zan kindly shared with us. He's shared a few different editions even. And then if you have the Padmakara's translation, which is pretty good translation, uh, if you go through those two together, breaking down the structures, you can figure out, now you can figure out the meaning. And then if you go through that whole book, I think you will get a really good grasp of classical Tibetan. And again, the reason The cool thing about Kunsala Magellan is that the language that Patrul Rinpoche is using is not super formal. Patrul Rinpoche was known for, even though he was such a scholar, such a uh, his knowledge was so vast about scriptures, he didn't compose in a style for scholars. He composed in a style that was accessible to everyone. So from that perspective, we should. I think this is a good text also because it's like almost a hybrid between classical and the colloquial back then. The grammar is still different from colloquial, but it's more accessible. So that being said, we will come back to our text. So this we've been talking about the relative clause. Are there any questions about relative clause so far? Did you guys think about it a little bit? Anything you want us to say? Relative clauses are very important to understand texts and prayers. They're actually they're all over the text. And sometimes the examples here are very short relative clauses. In the classical text, the relative clause can be really long and it's very important to be able to identify it. So just to recap, the relative clause functions the same way an adjective would with a noun. The relative clause, the relative clause is doing basically is it's giving you extra information about the noun, a noun. So, I mean, that's that. It can be either, what is most common, the most common way is to have it before the sentence, before the noun, I'm sorry, connected with a connective particle, but it could also be after without a particle. And the way to recognize it is because there will be a verb followed by a pa or a ba, meaning like an infinitive form verb. Whenever you see an infinitive form verb in the middle of a sentence, you can intuit there that is very likely that's a relative clause. So we have a couple of examples here. Che, well, carpo and che. So we can say, well, this is for the adjective. Uh, Carpo che or che carpo. White, both are white dharma. Now, this is the relative clause example now. So we have the noun is Buddha, Sanje. And the extra information we have about the Buddha is Chö Tenpa, so taught the Dharma. So one way to have the relative clause, this is the most common way. Chö Tenpe Sanje, the Buddha that taught the Dharma. Or Sanje Ki Chö Tenpa. I'm sorry, no Ki, Sanje Chö Tenpa. This would be, and again, the same meaning. So when translating the relative clause, we use these words in English: who, that, which, where, when, whose. But this would become common, and we want to go over a formula to translate the relative clauses. So these are a set of examples. I just want to go through them because they explain the relative clause and the relationship with different kinds of verbs and structures that we have learned. So for example, when it's used with a tade verb, ten is the verb in this case, chutenpa, is the same example as above. Chutenpe sanje, the Buddha who taught the Dharma, or sanje chutenpa. Again, the Buddha who taught the Dharma. Chepa, this is the tade verb. Dikpa chepe mi, the human who did evil deeds or commits evil deeds. Be Dikpa chepa. Oh, I'm sorry. Midik pachepa, same meaning as above. So again, we see the same function as in the adjective noun connected by an agentive particle before or after without any particle. It can also work with a tamide verb. So dusum du shukpe sanje. Dusum is the three times. Du is the ladun. Shukpa is to dwell or to stay, to remain. So a Buddha who abides in the three times dusum. The tamide verb is shuk, is a verb of dwelling and motion. And again, it's flipped underneath. Sanje dusum du shukpa. You see that again the verb is in infinitive form. Sharchokne. This is the source particle. Sharchokne from the east. Charwe nima. The sun which arises, again, infinitive, from the eastern direction. The sun that arises from the eastern direction. So you see always that who when translating. And then they flip it again. Nima Sharchok ne charwa. Same meaning as before. Now within the sentence, it can also be the object. So Sanjay ki tempe che. So Sanjay ki tempe che. The dharma, in this case, where the main topic here is the dharma, which was taught by the Buddha.
So can I jump in with a question?
Yes.
And this also goes back to the prior page, and it actually goes back to connective particles. And so every time I see one of those connective particles, and I know it has three, apposition or connecting and if the adjective
Mhm.
precedes the noun, but then I thought it was the default was of. But now when it seems as though that connective particle was being translated as who, for example,
Yeah.
and I just so looking at that connected particle, we shouldn't, in this context, we should not be thinking, oh, that means of, right?
Because you will identify it as a relative clause because you will see that there is a verb in infinitive form and you have to intuit. You have to sniff. Oh, this could be a relative clause. Let me think about the situation. Uh, because but also not necessarily because a relative clause also could not doesn't necessarily use a connective particle. But yeah, there is more functions. So that's just an
Yeah, but
introductory. Mhm.
I mean, I guess this is obvious, but so in the context of a um, relative clause, a connective particle then can take on other meanings like who, that, which, all that stuff.
Yes, you can
Okay.
know that. You can know that, by the way. You can think like this. If the connective particle is connected to an infinitive ending, like pa or wa, it's very, very likely this will be a relative clause.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you think about that, maybe that might make it a little bit, a little bit, it's like you're an investigator, you're having the suspicion that, oh, look at this must be a relative clause.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, we learned the three functions, right?
Yeah.
Of, of, connective adjective, and apposition, and now also a relative clause.
Okay.
Okay, so uh, where were we? Oh yeah, Sanjeki Tenpe Che, the Dharma that is taught by the Buddha or Che Sanjeki Tenpa. Again, the Dharma which was taught by the Buddha. Mi Chepe Dikpa. So in this case, the agente particle is marking the human. Chepe Dikpa. The evil deed um, committed by the human, by the person. So you can see that in this case, the main thing, the main topic of the sentence would be this Dikpa. Again, Dikpa, Mi Chepa. The evil deed that the man committed. So now you can be also work with linking verbs. Mitakpa yinpe chu. The dharma, the phenomena, which is impermanent. Mitakpa yinpe chu. Or chu mitakpa yinpa. The dharma is which is impermanent. Location on space and time. Lame chutenpe gunpa. Gunpa is the monastery. So the monastery where the Lama taught the Dharma. Gonpa, Lamechu Tenpa. The Gompa, where the monastery, where the Lama taught the Dharma, same meaning.
I have a question real quick.
Yes.
So in this one example that you just went over, Lama has an agentive particle. So that agentive particle is referring to the infinitive verb in the relative clause.
No, oh yes, exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
Lame Chuten, because this is a tade verb. It needs just because it's within the relative clause, all the rules still apply,
right.
Yeah, it will
Then
still. Mhm.
I guess it would just be context, but I'm wondering how you would tell that that wasn't the subject of the sentence.
Um, because usually this wouldn't be here, this infinitive form of the verb. Usually, most of the
Uh-huh.
time, it would just be la me chuten. You could
Right.
say, for example, gonpa, gonpa la me chuten, but then that would be lama would be the agent. In this case, because this is infinitive and there is this agentive particle, it's telling you that this is the main. There's a how to say intuitively, eventually you intuitively notice if you get this feeling just by the structure of the sentence. For example, I was sharing with Carmelasm that today I'm teaching relative clause and she didn't even remember what it was.
Mhm.
I had to tell
And I
her,
would
oh, it's like
also
Mhm.
and I would also assume that in addition to the infinitive in the relative clause, there will be a separate regular verb at the end, and this how you will have another somehow.
Yeah. Actually, that's coming up after this. After this, we're gonna go through the function. So right now we're zooming into the relative clause. And then after this section, we go over how the relative clause works within a sentence.
Okay.
So this is coming up. That's a really good point actually. So that's the context, right? Um, but oh yeah, so I was telling her this. Of course, she couldn't explain to me exactly what it was, but she can obviously recognize them and translate them properly. And even sometimes, even though I know these rules, I look at a text and I get confused. And when I ask her, she intuitively knows the meaning, because she was raised using this script and more or less this language. So there is an intuitive. My point is that there is after we read a lot, right now we have to study the structure, but as we read and read, some kind of intuitive thing arises telling you this is talking about this, you know. So is that clear? Clear? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That
Mhm.
after, with context and over time, you just kind of get the sense of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For now, I feel that's why it's important to do our homeworks. Like if you guys translate this next section, will begin to feel it, you know. And also, like I said, I recommend translating all your daily prayers. Do your daily prayers in Tibetan. At first, it may feel like you're just, even though you know the meaning, it doesn't feel intimate. It doesn't feel like you get the meaning. But as you do it over and over and over, the feeling begins to come through, and one begins to find beauty in the poetry of the prayers, in the Tibetan poetry. Actually, Tibetans are very much a poetic culture. They have really beautiful poetry, and their language is really conducive to writing poetry, actually. There is these many poetry books that are really, really beautiful, like Gendun Chopel's, for example. I have one book somewhere. I think it's in Kathmandu. I have the PDF in Kathmandu. Maybe I'll share it if you guys are interested. The sixth Dalai Lama also has some really nice poetry. There's a little booklet with his love poems. Um, anyways, I'll go back to our topic. Chumepe Yul, the land or place where there is no dharma. Chumepe Yul, or Yul Chumepa. Same meaning. Sanje Majunpe Kalpa. So the Kalpa, where Jun is to come, where Buddha has not come or did not come. Kalpa Sankhya Majunpa. So this is the information about the Kalpa. So what is key to remember here is that relative clauses form inseparable units, like nominal groups. So when there is particles connecting, they apply to the whole thing. So you think of a relative clause as a block, as a blockchain, as a thing that you cannot temper with. Okay, think of it as in that sense, conceptualize it as this. In a way, when reading Tibetan, um, this is what our brain is doing because of there's no spaces. Our brain is putting everything into chunks, you know, this goes there, this goes there. If you separate it incorrectly, the meaning changes, right? My teacher in Kathmandu, he's been trained as a lama since he was a very young boy. He can actually read the pecha in Tibetan and say it in English instantaneously. Obviously, it's not a perfect English. His English is not perfect, but he can look at. Sometimes I thought, oh, is he reading English? And I look and he's reading the pecha in Tibetan and translating it in that moment. It's quite amazing. So, um, his brain is doing all those things, you know. Okay, so how should one translate the sentences? First, two steps. First, you identify the relative clauses within the sentence, one or however many there are. Don't forget always infinitive form, and they can either come before or after the noun they modify. Okay, so these are the clues to identify the relative clause, and then you translate using this. This is the formula, so to say, to translate the relative clause. Ending with there will be the verb in infinitive plus connective particle plus the noun, or the other form, the noun plus. I'm sorry, this is the translation. So you would translate it, if this is the form with a connected particle, you would translate it noun plus who, that, which, whom, where, etc., and the relative clause. So like Kip was saying, in this case, the connected particle can be translated as this, but don't forget that this is the most common form, but there is another form of relative clauses which doesn't use the connected particle. So just because there is no connected particle does not mean that it's not a relative clause. Okay, so now again, Sanjeki and Peche. So again, this is just an example again for how to translate it. Sanjeki, the Buddha, who, the connected particle becomes who, taught the Dharma. So in English, you have to put the noun first, the connected particle, and then the relative clause. So if this is the formula, literally you just flip it. You go, again, as usual, you just go from right to left. 3, identifying the grammatical function of the nouns modified by the relative clauses, forming inseparable units within the larger sentence. Okay, so now this is what Federico mentioned before. Now, once we have identified the relative clause, we have to see what function that relative clause has within the sentence. And this is also something, this sentence I think is quite important. In this way, so that noun can have two different functions. One within its relative clause, and the other one within the larger frame of the sentence. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. Just because there is this relative clause doesn't mean like that's all it does. It has its own world within the clause, but it also has a role to play within the bigger sentence. We'll do these next few examples and this will become clear. So for example, this is the example. Sanji ki tipa chepe mi la chete no. So identifying the relative clause, because this is infinitive here. And if there is a connected particle, okay, this must be the relative clause. And then the relative clause modifies the noun me, yeah, right? The person. So we have, like before, we have the person who did this. So to that, the Buddha taught the Dharma. To the person who did evil deeds, who committed misdeeds.
I think in English we get away with the use of who. So
Yes.
somehow who, but in Tibetan, they don't use who. The noun has a double function, while in English, who is the sort of the twin of the noun in the relative clause.
Yeah, exactly. So the relative clause will use this who, which, that, whom, etc. But yeah, so you guys can see that in this case, the relative clause, for example, is the person that committed this evil deed. So this is the noun for the relative clause, but this noun in the relative clause as a whole functions as the object of the Buddha's teaching, right? Marked by the ladun. So this is the role that in this case the relative clause is playing the role of an object. But the relative clause can play any role. And this will become clear in these next few examples. So, but the steps that they're recommending us here is you identify the relative clause, you translate the noun and its relative clause, so you translate it. Then you identify the grammatical function of the noun within the larger sentence. So this is what I just said. The noun is followed by the particle la. So it's the recipient, is the object of the teaching. So these are the three steps to take. You see, oh, relative clause, you translate it, and then you identify the role that the relative clause plays within the sentence. These next few examples are nice because they use the same vocabulary and put it in different places. For
Hey,
example,
Daniel,
yes.
so on that third step, identify the grammatical function of the noun. What I want to rephrase that as identify the grammatical function of the modified noun within the larger sentence, or shouldn't that be identify the grammatical function of the noun um, as modified by the relative clause within the larger sentence?
Yeah,
Is
you can think of it like that, but don't forget that, like I said, here, in this way, the same noun can have two different grammatical functions. So even though it's modified, it has its own world, like you said, within the relative clause, still it will have also its other function. So it's like this, If this is a noun inside within my thumbs, it has its own world within the clause, and it also has its own function within the larger sentence. So what you said is correct also, but then there is also we have to see the other functions. I think this will become clear after you see these examples. If you're still unclear after the examples, let me know and we'll go over it.
Thank you.
Yeah. For example, this is what we just did, right? The person that committed negative deeds, to that person, Ladon, the Buddha is the agent marked, taught the Chu, the Dharma, right? So that's one example here. Dikpachepe me, again, the person who committed evil deeds, is the king, Gyalpo. So in this case, the relative clause has this function, we identified it. So this person is the king. So this is linking verb. So again, dikpachepe mi ladun sonam me. This ladun is marking a possession because there is me, right? To him it does not exist. Sonam has no merit. So dikpachepe mi la. So to this dikpachepe mi, this person who commits evil deeds, there is no merit. Okay, another one. Dikpachepe mi e with a agentive particle. So now a relative clause becomes the agent. Dakla tau looks at me. So the person who commits evil deeds marked by the agentive particle looks at me. Again, Dikpachepe, Dikpachepe me, the person who commits, this is again um, our relative clause. And then we have Jalpo, marked by the agentive particle, Pseudo. So the Jalpo kills or killed Sedo, the person who commits evil deeds. So here's another one. Dikpachepe mi, Nordi, Dikpachepe mi ne, Tobam. So because this bam is after the main verb, we know that it's a question. Nor these wealth. Ne is the source particle. So was this wealth obtained, top, was because it's a question, from the person who committed evil deeds? Is that clear now, Kip?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So we can see that this relative clause basically can do anything. It's just the structure remains solid, but it can go, it can do anything basically within the sentence. So there's a few more examples, but I think we got it now. I think it's clear. I recommend going through them, and if there is any questions, you can ask in our group, because I think if we go over all of them, we won't have enough class time. And I just wanted to cover also interrogative and indefinite pronouns. These are very important. The relative clause will come in as you translate the sentences, it will come through. So I know it's a little bit difficult, but we will, of course, we are a nice group and we can ask each other, and here also on the chat, on our group chat. Interrogative and indefinite pronouns. These are really important to know. There's 4 main ones and are usually placed right before the verb. In English, this is like what, who, whom, whose, to whom, which, etc. So gang is one. Gang means what or who. It can also mean who. Gangin. By the way, in colloquial Tibetan, they would use gare for gang. Gare. But this is more classical, gang. Jumse gangin. What is the reason? Jumsen. Gyu is cause. Sen is mark, or the symbol, the sign of the cause. The sign of the cause is translated as reason. This also is used a lot in colloquials. In colloquial, we would say Jumsen garere. What is the reason? But in classical, we would use Jumsen kangin. What is the Jumsen, the reason?
That's
Gang.
cool.
Gang.
If you say gang
Mhm.
to someone in Tibet who doesn't know classical Tibetan, would the person understand it or not at all?
Well, the way you say because in Tibetan in colloquial is Gangin Serna. That means, but it means like Gang is what, Yin is, Ser is like if you say it, Serna is if you say it, basically that's because. If you want to explain something, you say, oh, because, da 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 da. In Tibetan, you say Gangin Serna, like what is like if you ask what it is, if you say what it is, da 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 da. Da. So it is there, but the
Oh,
more
yeah, I understand. It is not that you don't use it, but yeah, right, in a different way. Yeah.
yeah you use it, it was kept. This next one, chi, for example, I was in Yolmo, and in Yolmo, their traditional language, they use this chi instead of gare. For example, they say chuming chi, like chi, like what's your name? And in the local language here in Bhutan, it's called Tsongkha, they say gachi.
Hmm.
So it's almost like half Tibetan, half classical, like gachi. And they say, what is your name? You say, Chu Ming is name. Chu is you. Chu Ming gachi. Also in Tsonga, they kept this yin, but they dropped the n. They say yin, yin, something like that. They write it like this, but they pronounce yin. They say "chemin gachi yin." They say like this here.
Hmm.
So because I know a little bit of classical, I can actually intuit where this is coming from, you know. Which makes it easier to learn these languages. But anyways, chi and ji are what or how for things. Dewe juni chi. Chi is what? Kang chi. Su is who. Su is also kept in colloquial. Just who. Like sure. Sure, you say in colloquial sure. Or suina. Who is it? Lama di suin. Who is this lama? Lama di suin. You can ask Cherangi, your Cherangi lama suin. Who is your lama? Uh, and others, they said it's four, but they're only showing three, I guess. I guess the next combinations. So we can also add chitsam, how many, and nam to this four. Yeah, nam is also an important one. Nam is time, which would mean when. I have a cool thing to say here. So namka, the word for sky or space sometimes in Tibetan is namka. Nam is actually means when, and it refers to time. Ka is the word that actually refers to space, like kandro, right? Space goer, kandro. Namka, namka is space, like namka norbu, the jewel of the space. But actually, one teacher told me that this nam, it actually refers to time, and the ka refers to space. So actually, namka is the space-time continuum. They had this notion already in ancient Tibetan that space and time are one thing, you know.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so
Right.
they made this word namka. Nowadays people only conceptualize it as being space, but according to actually this teacher, he's such well educated in Tibetan and other things. This is a now he's a yogi. I see him sometimes around the Bodha stupa walking. He looks like Milarepa. He's has really long hair. He just wears this white robe. He's kind of half naked,
Hmm.
and he's he's always doing kora with his mom. And yeah, if you see him, he looks like a yogi, but he's so knowledgeable. You know, he taught me this. He taught me this thing, and I thought it was also really cool. Namkha, like Namkha Nyingpo, the lama, the famous lama from Bhutan, and also Namkha Nyingpo is the one of the 25 disciples of Guru Rinpoche. So Namkha Nyingpo means the essence of, literally, it would mean according to him, the essence of time space continuum, right? But Namkha is usually just translated as space. But what he said makes sense because, like you guys can see here, Nam actually means when. Somehow this Nam is related to time. You guys will see, as you guys see this Nam around, you will recognize it as time. Okay, so then these particles, interrogative pronouns, actually, if you combine them with other particles, their meaning gets more and it gets enhanced. Kangi, literally of what, right? Of gi, of what or of who or whose. Sui, like whose. Chi, of what, you know? You can throw a connected particle and then the question becomes more precise. Kangi, if you put an agentive particle, is by what? I mean, it's just the particle just does the same function basically. This is why Tibetan is so cool and flexible, you know? If you have these particles, you can throw them on anything and then that thing just gets the meaning multiplied by the power of Gangi. Su, and this Su with that size, the agentive particle. So by whom? Chi, by what? Gangle, gangne. They have these a little bit more complex, fancy forms. Whence or from what, like gangle, gangne. These are both agentive particles. They could just say gangle or gangne, but sometimes they like to, Tibetans like to have these cool sounding things. Gangle, gangne. Sometimes lamas say like, oh, the yimpa la yimpa. Yimpa la yimpa is, the yin is to be or is, right? La yimpa is like the way that things are. Sometimes you hear them say, oh, this is yimpa la yimpa, the way it is, Sounds cool, cool thing too. It comes out of the tongue, nice. Yimpa la yimpa. I also like saying that. Huh?
Kind of like que sera sera in
Oh
Spanish,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Yes, actually. Yeah. There's some things just sound nice, They have like a tone, and it's nice. They're nice to say. There's this Spanish song, Lo que pasó, pasó. Actually, there's a song, right? Lo que pasó, pasó. What happened, happened between you and me. Anyways, gang la, to what, right? La is ladon, so to. Sula, to whom? You can say, oh, this Sula, Sula Tegire, who are you giving this to? Sula, to whom? Chirchila, Chirchila. I haven't seen this one personally, but I'm sure it exists. To what or why? Chirchila. So who has great wisdom? Sherab Champo, Sulaye. So to whom, Laye, to whom, Sulaye. Like for example, if I have it, I say Ngalaye, Sulaye. To whom? Because it's Su, that's what's telling you that it's a question. So these are all interrogative, right? So whenever you see these particles, you can intuit it could be a question. And in colloquial Tibetan, it's the same. You say sure. You don't need to add when we learn that, I guess, you need to add usually an extra particle to imply that it's a question. But when you use su, gare, etc., then you don't need to use that particle because the fact that these interrogative pronouns are there, it's implying that it is a question. Where were we? Oh, mi de da kang ne yung. Where do these men come from? Midhead. Midhead, sorry. Midhead, those men. Gang ne yung. From where? Gang can be what or where? Gang ne yung. Come. Midhead, gang ne yung. We have here, whose house is that? De, that, sui, of whom, Kangpain is, that house is of whom. But in English, we would say, whose house is that? Dewa Gangleshar. So from where lays the source particle? From where or from what? From where? Dewa Shar. Happiness arose. Shar. Kong ni Gangladro. Him to where goes. Where is he or she going? Right? So Tibetans use this interrogative as to maintain the structure of Sanskrit texts. So this gang is the most used, therefore relative pronouns that, who, which. without being question words. So this can also not necessarily a question if it's has these forms which are copied from Sanskrit. Indefinite pronouns are formed by adding the indefinite particle shik or the particle yang, kyang, ang to one interrogative pronoun. So now this is the other kind of pronouns. This section is interrogative and indefinitive. I'm sorry, yeah, indefinite pronouns. So when the verb of the sentence is negated, the indefinite pronoun is translated as nothing, no one, or nothing. For example, 강식, we know 강 means what or where. So 강식 literally means like what, a what, in English, a what. It would be something. I mean, it makes sense, you know. A what, or a whatever kind of, oh, it's a whatever. It's a something, right? Or a someone, or someone, right? One, shik, gang, some. That which, 강식, or to which. You can have all these meanings. 강식, sushi. Yeah.
Sorry, the last one seems to be conveying most literally the construction, right? The
Yeah.
one who. It's really nice.
Yeah, yeah. The one who, yeah, actually, exactly. The one who.
But by the way, this is also stolen from Sanskrit, this whole thing. I mean, this
yeah.
how, yeah, right.
Yeah, they're telling us their secret here. Qishik, something to what? 강양, whoever. This yang usually means ever, like whoever, whatever. Yeah, whatever. 강양, 취양, whatever, or anything. 수양, whoever or anyone, 수양. Couple of examples here. Return to 수양 meadow. Oh, so when it's negated, it's just no one. There is no one. Richo is the mountain hermitage. Du is Ladon. Suyangme. There is no one at the mountain hermitage. Like I went to that Richo actually, right? I'm sorry, I went to the Durcho. The channel ground is Durcho. In this case, Kai burial place also is the same. Durcho. It's the same Cho. Cho just means amongst. So Ri means mountain. So it means like amongst the mountains, like a remote amongst the mountains. Turtu is the channel ground. So Turtu do Suyangme. I can say that, right? I went and there was nobody there. Suyangme. Telle from that. Ganyangme. There is nothing or yeah, there's nothing or no one. Telle. Oh, in this case, this le is not source, is apart from that. Because if the don't forget that if the connective, I'm sorry, the source particle is negated, it means apart from. That's one of the things. And we have reached the end of this chapter. And I'm very happy because I was hoping we could finish this chapter today. And now more vocabulary words. 강삭. This is an important word. It means the person or the individual. For example, usually in terms of the selflessness studies and practices, there's 강삭이 dagmepa. Dagmepa is selflessness. Kangsagi Dagmepa, the selflessness of the individual, which is the main practice in the Hinayana. And Chugi Dagmepa, the selflessness of phenomena, is the main practice of the Mahayana. This is an important word to know. So here's more good words to know. And then where is it? And then we have our homework, of course. So please go through your homework. A few more words to learn. Return is a cool word. And then next class we will do the auxiliary verbs. Are there any questions about what we covered today? I think everything is clear. So please send me your homework and I'll check it. Then I will also, I'm gonna take a look at this book and see, like, I'm gonna calculate, I think between 2 or 4 more classes, whatever I feel like more or less it will take us. If we happen to finish it before, then we'll start a short colloquial. Do a short introduction to colloquial Tibetan for those of you who are interested. And then if you really want to learn Tibetan, what I will teach you theoretically is not enough. And I'm not a native speaker. I have an accent and I miss things. My vocabulary is not so vast. So actually I was talking to Claire about this, and I recommend that besides studying here, if you really want to learn colloquial, if you just want to learn a little bit just for your knowledge, it's fine. Like, you can just take the class. It's up to you really. But if you really want to be able to speak and understand, I recommend you take classes with native speakers, which I am also arranging. I have actually my friends. I am friends with the guys who are the. Actually, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop the recording here. Okay, then I'll tell you more. Um, we can start Ngoa, our dedication. So nam di tam jesik pani tom ne nye pe tanam panchi chega na chi palap tu pai. Si pe zole joa tolwa sho. Chanchup san cho rin po che ma che pa nam che jur chi che pa nyam par me pa yang gong ne gong lu pelwa sho.